Hey, hi. My name is Andy. I hope you hear me correctly. Carefully. I need some apple here. Hope it's fine. I am a professor at INSEAD. I realized that I'm probably the only management speaker here at this conference, so I'm feeling a little anxious right now. But thank you for the love. I study social status and power. I essentially look at the things that people do in a workplace where people try to enhance their power or their status, and things that, sometimes you think they're enhancing your status, but it actually backfires. And so today I'm going to talk about this very new line of research that looks at how consumption behaviors, things we buy and things we wear to the office, can potentially hurt you when we call it selection decisions. I don't mean selecting products or anything. I mean when we're hiring you, when we select you and pick you as a candidate to hire or not. This research is done in collaboration with my colleagues, Charlene, who's a professor at NTU. She's in marketing. We need to have a marketing person in this project. And Stefan Tao, who is my colleague at INSEAD. This is a photo of us at Bali. We had to experience some conspicuous consumption while riding this. So we did a riding retreat in Bali. We got one of those villas. It's totally Stefan's fault. And then we wrote a paper up in Bali then. So it's a good idea if anyone you want to do like a riding retreat. Anyways, so one of the key things that we know that hirers look for is that we get people to submit an application to us. And essentially candidates tend to review information to the selection committee and all that. It could be information from your CV, and from your CV I could tell your education, your background, which country you're from. I could tell things about who you're connected with by looking at your references, who your referees are. And then in some applications we also see things like marital status, your lifestyle choices. Some people write about hobbies. I know in Singapore sometimes people even put like nice little photographs of themselves, even though they're applying for jobs as a salesperson or administrative position and all that. But beyond that, I think that people review a lot more about themselves during job interviews, where we invite you to the office and we have this one-on-one conversation with you and we talk about different things. Sometimes we ask things about, tell me more about why you deserve this job and so on. But beyond that, we also see how you're dressed. And many times, when we go to the job interviews, we don't just wear shorts and flip-flops unless you're applying for jobs as a lifeguard. But we wear our Sunday best. We wear nice clothes and hopefully something that could signal that we are competent, we are smart, we're intelligent. Organizations use such information to determine something we call fit. And fit is very broad. It could be, does it fit our culture? It could be, does it fit what we're looking for, the job roles that we have? Do you have the capabilities? Do you have the personality? And all these factors lead to what we call fit. In this research, the overarching question we have here is to examine job candidates' communication of the love for luxury products. No, we're not saying that you write in your CV, I love Louis Vuitton. We're not saying that. We're not saying that you come in a t-shirt that says I love LV or anything like that. But the small things that you do, whether you do it intentionally or not, signal something. You may come with a nice watch, and the interviewer may realize, oh, that's a Rolex or that's a Patek, and they realize certain things. You may be driving to work, and they realize, oh, you're driving a very nice car. It's a Rolls Royce or something like that. But all these small things signal who you are, your identity, and so on. In this research, we look at conspicuous consumption, or we also, kind of use that as a gauge of how people's purchase or love for luxury products could actually impact the decisions in the workplace. And when we mean luxury products, we drew on the definitions used by psychologists and economists. Products or experiences that are more expensive than equivalent goods and are often either naturally or artificially scarce. Most of this work is done by you guys, the marketing folks. You study luxury products and how people make decisions in luxury. But none of these OB scholars actually try to understand what luxury does, luxury consumption does in the workplace. And I think that there need to be more collaboration between those fields, because what you wear to work impact how we perceive you at work, then impact whether we hire you or not, and can potentially impact whether we promote you or not, whether we like you or not, whether we think you're competent or not. What we wear matters. So, we decided to study this from a selection decision standpoint, at a point of organizational entry. Now, to be frank, when we first thought about this, Charlene and I were actually shopping in New York. We lived in New York for many years. And then we were looking at consumption behaviors, and we went to Louis Vuitton and all that nice little boutique over there. And then we thought, hey, there's an interesting idea here, which is which is, maybe we should, we came up with this title for this project. It was, don't wear Prada when your boss wears Gap. And we wanted to test this. Of course, it's a little bit difficult. It got complicated because once you've been in this organization enough, people look beyond just what you wear. They look about your history or how you're interacting with people. And so we wanted a clean setting. And so we chose the point of organizational entry where recruiters have no clue who you are other than the information you provide to them in your CV and from the interaction you have during job interviews. And so we chose that setting. We first were exploring different sectors or different kinds of people. And then we realized, you know what, let's try something else. Let's focus on the majority. If you look at a lot of jobs in the world, low-paying jobs, or jobs where you operationalize, less than a median individual annual income in the US, they make up the majority of most jobs. Most of us are not CEOs. Most of us probably are much lower down in the hierarchy. And so we decided to focus on these jobs. More importantly, there's also other research that shows that lower status people, or people who take up those jobs, they are the ones who actually spend quite a bit of money on luxury products. In fact, we find that other research that shows that low-income households in the US spend about 40% of their consumption expenditure on luxury products, like cars, watches, expensive wines, whiskeys, and all that. And on top of that, the worst part is that that research suggests that these people, they incur substantial debt, which is not surprising given their low income, and they actually spend 40% on these things. Importantly, a lot of work in psychology also suggests that it's not a psychological desire for these lower status people to buy these products. And I'll unpack some of this research in a bit. Why do people buy luxury products? Why do people engage in conspicuous consumption? And I think the first speaker has really suggested a lot of benefits of conspicuous consumption. Whether in the workplace or not, we use what we wear as a form of communicating who we are, our desired identity. We love Louis Vuitton, and you wear the Louis Vuitton. I'm cool, I have money. You kind of communicate who you are and your desired self, your identity, your dream self. Importantly, in a lot of organizational research, we also see that luxury products or conspicuous consumptions have benefits. For example, people tend to perceive you as having higher status, having wealth. Oh, you actually have money to buy the expensive Patek Philippe watch. Or beyond that, people tend to have this kind of a carryover effect to say that, it's not just that you have the money, but you have professional success. You must be a top manager, executive at this great firm because you can afford such things. People tend to see you as competent. People tend to see you as intelligent. All of these are grounded on a very traditional, very fundamental theory called the costly signals theory. Essentially, when wasteful behaviors with little functional utility essentially signal status. If you're able to spend more, 20 times more for the same watch, where the other watch also tells the same time, that's called wasteful behaviors, or wasteful behaviors that actually would signal that you have money to actually do that. And luxury consumption allows people to do that. One last line of research actually suggests us that people who engage in luxury consumptions are being perceived to be more persuasive than other people. But of course, there are a lot of boundary conditions. You don't want your salesperson who's selling you, something that's just $5 and he wears this expensive big Rolex watch. You must be suspicious about whether the product is fake, or how this person earns money, all that. But there's some boundary conditions beyond that. But then again, people do perceive they're more persuasive, they are more effective, and maybe you're more, you have some degree of professional success. There are also psychological benefits. Research in social psychology suggests us that if you feel powerless, you tend to buy high status products because in some way it compensates the sense of powerlessness. And we also see a low status people in terms of your SES, in terms of how you think other people perceive you as being low status. You then tend to buy luxury products because it makes you feel better. I'm not that low status all the time. I can afford that expensive watch, the expensive handbags. And especially in Asia and a lot of contexts that value status signals, and this is why the luxury market actually thrives in this part of the world, because people need to signal. And by signaling, not only signaling to other people, it makes them feel good. It makes them feel some degree of power, some degree of status. But we think that these benefits may come at a huge cost, especially when you are, in terms of you pay more money for such things, and they may not be the most essential things that you need. You may lead to financial debt, financial loss, and importantly from this research, it may not allow you to get this job that you want. So here, we propose that job candidates, specifically for low-paying jobs, actually face a penalty when they communicate conspicuous consumption. Now, I focus on low-paying jobs, but I'm going to talk a little bit about what high-paying jobs do as well. Why low-paying jobs, and what's the psychology behind? How do we evaluate people who are applying for low-paying jobs? So, here's an example of low-paying jobs. Administrative assistants, they're not like really bad jobs or anything, they're just not as well-paying as the CEO jobs, C-suite jobs. Salespeople on the ground. One of the key things that hirers look out for is, for such jobs, it doesn't really require a lot of skill. It doesn't require a PhD. You require some skill, but not a PhD level. It doesn't require you to use very sophisticated statistics or anything to analyze something. And so for those jobs, what really people tend to understand and try to figure out is, does this person fit the organization in terms of, will this person be motivated? Will this person be satisfied? Will this person be committed? Because if these people, with these low skilled jobs are committed and motivated, then they generally should perform well. And so we drew on this theory called need, supply, fit. Essentially, it's the degree to which the candidate's needs are adequately rewarded by the organization. If the organization can give the candidates what they want to make them feel motivated, we think that these are the strongest predictors for low-paying jobs. These employees would then be satisfied, they'll be satisfied with their career, they'll be committed to the organization. And so, drawing from there, we think the key criteria that people look for low-paying jobs is the need for money. These are low-paying jobs. And so we think this is diagnostic that will lead us to understand that candidates will actually be satisfied and committed to the jobs. Now, if the need for money is important, what does conspicuous consumption actually activate? It may actually activate that you may not need the money because you can afford such goods. Now, of course, recruiters also know how much I'm paying you, and there's no way the amount of money I'm paying you is going to allow you to afford that Lamborghini. And so, the need for money would then suggest that such candidates who apply for such a job may have income from other sources, that you may not actually need money from this job, and therefore you may not be committed to the job. And so here's our theoretical model. Our first hypothesis is that conspicuous consumption, under the context of low-paying jobs, should lead to poorer outcomes in higher jobs. So all our participants are evaluators. When they evaluate candidates who engage or communicate conspicuous consumption, we think that they would judge them as being less hireable. But more importantly, what is the mechanism? This is H2. We basically think that when you engage in conspicuous consumption, people then perceive you that you do not need the job as much. And because I perceive you that you do not need the job as much, I then think you do not fit this organization or this job. And this lack of fit would then reduce the tendency that people will actually hire you in this job. So we basically test this model in all of our studies. Now beyond that, I remember I focused a lot on low-paying jobs, but what about high-paying jobs? We have a lot of research that says that conspicuous consumption is great. It helps you gain status. So is it possible that high-paying jobs, is fine to wear that Gucci handbag or bring a Gucci handbag to work? And so here we think that we predict and we test that for high-paying jobs, conspicuous consumption will hurt you less. Whether it benefits or not, we'll see what the data says. But we think that it will definitely hurt you less. Why? Remember, our model suggests that low-paying job, the key criteria is actually the need for the job. But for high-paying jobs, it's no longer just the need for the job, it's about your expertise, your experiences. And we say high-paying jobs, at least in our study, we're talking about a VP level, but you could go all the way to C level, C-1, C-2 level. For those jobs, you don't just care about whether you need those jobs, the money. In fact, need for money may actually be not a very good thing, so just that you don't have a good job before that. We look for other diagnostic tools, the symbols like expertise, experiences, and all those things. More importantly, how in the world did this candidate afford that luxury bag? For low-paying jobs, we attribute it to people outside, to sources outside this person. There's no way this person can afford that bag because we don't pay that much. It must be someone else. It must be from a family fortune or something, or this person has a rich family or friends and all that, or this person stole or something. We don't know. For high-paying jobs, we attribute it to the candidate. The candidate probably has the experience and a good job previously to afford such things, and therefore it's actually not bad for those high-paying jobs people. So for one of our studies, our last study, we actually tested this. We think that job status or in other words, we operationalize into the low-paying, high-paying jobs, that will moderate the relationship to its perceived need for jobs. So we're going to test this entire model in the final study, a moderated sequential mediation of final study. So overview of studies, the first 3 studies I'm going to report, they test the main effect as well as the entire mediation, serial mediation model. In all of these studies, we recruited people from different parts of the world and different kinds of people. They're working adults in Asia, students in Asia, they're HR professionals in different parts of the world. We use essentially a hiring simulation, so I'm an experimentalist. And I want to conduct as realistic as possible, but it's very unethical to make real candidates apply for jobs and wear a Rolex and don't get that job. And so we had to use simulations. And so we use a hiring simulation for a lot of our studies. In all of these studies, we manipulate the kind of information that people review. So it's not like you come into a big giant Gucci sign on your t-shirt or anything like that. They're very subtle, they're very naturalistic, and some of them are really, really subtle just to test the strength of the effect. In the last study, we hired HR managers from the US who actually have power to make a lot of key hiring decisions in the US. Here we tested an entire moderated sequential mediation model, and we use the same simulation we used in study 1. Study 1, we recruited people from the US, working adults from the US. These are non-AMTO participants. These are overly priced Qualtrics participants. They're working adults who are currently working in the US, so they have some work experience. Use a simple between subject design, conspicuous consumption versus a control condition. In this paradigm, we told people there's a hiring simulation. You are part of HR staff and you are evaluating this candidate, and you have all the materials for this candidate, all the job scopes for this task. This was a job for an administrative assistant position. You had a job scope, CV, and all those things. Then on top of that, we told them this. You interview this candidate and you realize that this candidate happened to be driving one of these cars. It's a between subject. So you either get this, conspicuous consumption, or the control condition. So can you guess the car on the right? Car on the right is a BMW. And of course, in our stimuli, we also wrote that BMW, so they know it's a BMW. And the other one is a Toyota. So we're not saying that one is high status and one is low. We're saying that at least contrasting them, they're relatively higher and relatively lower. And for an administrative assistant position, if you drive a fancy, there's probably a 5 Series BMW, there's going to be, people start wondering, okay, how do you afford such money? How do you afford that car? And then on top of that, we noted what the candidate wore. You can notice that it's the same blue shirt, the same blue tie, same gray tie, but they wore different watches. One wore a Rolex and the other wore a Casio. In all of our studies, we measured these things. We only included these measures in there, so we didn't have extra measures in there. They didn't work and we dumped it away. These are the only measures we have in there. All these measures were adapted from previous research. We measured 3 things, if you remember our model. The first thing we measured was the need for the job. We asked people, how much do you think this candidate needs this job to make a living? How much do you think this candidate needs this job to earn money, and so on. The second is a fit measure. To what extent do you think this candidate fits this role as an administrative assistant in this organization? And the last one, we asked participants whether you would hire this candidate. In the real world, most companies actually, when they have such decisions, they give you 3 options. Yes, I'll hire you. No, I'm going to kick you out. 3, maybe. And so we measured these 3 things. So the results. When we look at H1, we're essentially looking at a predictor of conspicuous consumption on the main dependent variable of hireability. We find that conspicuous consumption reduces this perception that you're hireable for this job. When we look at the mediators, we basically find the same effect that supports our hypothesis. We find that people think that if you engage in conspicuous consumption, you need a job less, and you fit the job less. More importantly, we find indirect effect, a full mediation pattern here that supports H2. This is study 1. So essentially, study 1 gives us a sense. Okay, we have an effect that is pretty strong. The mediation is very strong. Let's try and test this in a different context. So we brought it to Singapore. We brought it to people who are less experienced. But that's important because we want to see social and personal perception of how general people tend to estimate people who consume or engage in conspicuous consumption. So we ran a study of undergrads at NTU, same design. This time we used a different material. We used some different materials. Now we use this sample as well because we're going to use social media now to manipulate conspicuous consumption. And we assume that people in NTU are pretty savvy with social media. It's not even technological university anyways. And so here we manipulated conspicuous consumption by first showing them a CV of the job applicants between subjects, so you're going to get conspicuous or control. We told them it's a job, a sales position. And so you see, if you cannot see up here, let me see if I have this. We have different positions, and you can actually see that, oh yeah, sales position is right at the bottom. So people can tell this is a lower status job. Next, we manipulated where they live. So if you are a Singaporean and you know the Singaporean addresses, this is a really expensive place at Sentosa that probably costs you $20 million to own one. And this is a regular HDB flat in Toa Payoh. More importantly, we tell people, which is what organizations actually do, is that beyond just looking at your CV, by the way, if you didn't know, organizations tend to look at your Facebook pages. We look at your social media profile. Just figure out who you are, whether you have you say any nasty things on Twitter or not. And so I have 2 fake Facebook pages. Do not tell Facebook or report because I still need the materials. One of them is a conspicuous consumption kind of Facebook page. I have, and then this person, basic. So we don't show this person these slides or anything. They actually go onto a Facebook page, they scroll through and look through it, the photos and all that. In the conspicuous consumption condition, this person has a BMW here, flies on business class, go on yacht trips, business class flights here and there. And then in the control condition, there's a very skinny photo of me and very young photo of me. In the conspicuous consumption, this is economy flight. We have the bus and someone complaining about the regular bus ride, and it's a regular status. It's not low status. In low status, you just walk. But this is regular status. And so again, we measure the same things, and we find the effect on hireability. If you engage in conspicuous consumption, you're deemed as less hireable. Also deemed to need the job less, and you're poorer fit for this job. Importantly, the mediation showed the same effect as well. We found support for H1 and H2. Now, at this point, we got a little bit more confident of our effect. We're going to try now to very, very subtly manipulate conspicuous consumption. In this third study, we recruited working adults in Singapore. At INSEAD, we have this pop-up lab where we go to a shopping mall, we set up booths, set up a few laptops, and get people walking around to take part in this study. These are people who have jobs in the Fusionopolis area. Again, manipulated the same way, conspicuous versus control. We use the same stimuli as study 1. And we give them the same things like the job scope, application form, and so on. But this time, we didn't show them the photos of the Rolex and the BMW. This time, we told them that I'm going to let you listen to a conversation, a phone call between the HR manager and the candidate. The HR manager is essentially trying to schedule something, a meeting, interview meeting with the candidate. And they just listen to it, and then you form some judgments about that. And it's a pretty involving conversation, but I'm just going to draw the parts where I manipulated conspicuous consumption. At some point in the interview, in the conversation, the HR manager asked, do you drive? Do you need, we're going to schedule an interview next Thursday at 11 a.m. Would you need a parking space? Interviewee says, yes. Manager says, no problem. Security requires some information. Can you give us your vehicle number and model and all that? And the interviewer said, it's a black BMW. The name is blah, blah, blah. The title, the number is blah, blah, blah. The control condition, you just ask the person, do you need parking space? The person says, no, I'm coming by bus. On top of that, there's a follow-up interview. We want to make it very involving. And so here the manager asked, our VP didn't manage to meet with you when you came for the interview last week. He had a conference call to attend to, but he would really like to meet with you. So I'm calling to schedule a meeting. Would you be free next Wednesday, the 23rd at 3 p.m.? And the conspicuous consumption condition, the person said, I'm really sorry, I'll be in Venice, which essentially is a very popular and very expensive place to travel from Singapore. And the other poor candidate will say, I'm really sorry, I'll be in Malacca. That's 3 hours away, it costs you $20. Again, we measure the same things. We got an effect on hireability. Conspicuous consumption led to lower rates of hireability. Same effect on need for job. Conspicuous consumption led to people perceiving to need a job less and poorer job fit. And again, the same mediation for H1 and H2. Now, the fun part. The last study. We realized that by controlling all of these measures, it's very easy. Now we are very confident of the effect on low status jobs. But how about high status jobs? A lot of us are not exactly low, and so it's always nice to wear that Louis Vuitton and all that. We want to buy luxury products. So we want some hope that luxury products can be very useful. And so here we recruited HR professionals from the US. These people can hire people. They have the power to do so, and they have the experience to do so. This time we use a 2x2 design. Conspicuous consumption versus control, but we also manipulate low-paying jobs and high-paying jobs. We use the same stimuli from study 1 to keep it consistent, We added a new variable on high-paying jobs here, and so instead of the administrative assistant position, remember we saw the labels at the top, the administrative assistant is right at the bottom, but at the top is senior vice president. And then to measure the same, we asked to include the same measures in this study. Here we're basically measuring and trying to test this moderation over here on the perceived need for job. Here's what we found. For a significant interaction, in general, we also replicated the effect on administrative assistant position. The control condition had a higher degree of higher evaluation in terms of need for job versus the conspicuous consumption condition. We also find a significant effect on need for job, which makes sense. Because basically, if you can afford more money, afford these expensive goods, you actually have less need for the job. But the effect is a lot smaller, which is why the interaction is significant. More importantly, how does the mediation look like? When we look only at low-paying jobs, we replicate all previous 3 studies. When we look at high-paying jobs, we also find significant interaction. But most importantly, is there a moderated serial mediation effect? And we do find an effect. The effect on the high-paying job is significantly weaker for the role of senior VP condition versus the role of administrative position. So we do find a moderated sequential mediation effect. So what are the implications? We think that conspicuous behaviors, consumption behaviors, are highly visible at work. Consumption behaviors in general are highly visible at work. And oftentimes, the source of gossip, social evaluation, and how people perceive you. And we really need a lot more such research. We need to study consumers beyond the point where they buy the products to the point where they bring the products to their social environment. How do people engage in those products? How do people perceive your customers when they have those products? There are potentially costly and unintended consequences of conspicuous consumption, as shown in this study. And this actually is very consistent with a lot of my other work that looks at nonverbal behavior. And sometimes when you do nonverbal behaviors, but you don't have that status to actually use those assertive nonverbal behaviors, you get reprimanded. And so you have to be very careful how to then use these status symbols. It's not just that because you're low status or a high status symbol, you get status. It's not as simple as that. You have to use them in some ways, a subtle way, and different ways to understand it. So there are a lot of boundary conditions that we really need to try and unpack in this area of research. I think it's a big dearth of research in this area. And lastly, signaling high status through one's consumption behaviors suggests that it can also be discriminated against. So in other words, if you are low status and you try to improve your status with these consumption behaviors, but actually you're being discriminated, at least from the results that we show, the hirers sometimes think of you as, you're not that high, so you don't need a job, I won't give you this job. In some ways, maintaining the status quo. It's unfortunate, but that happens. But I think there's some limitations in this research which suggests a lot of ways that we could improve and try to figure out what's happening. One area that we think that we're exploring right now is that right here, we didn't manipulate the status of the organization. What if you're working for a really high status organization and then people expect you to wear that expensive watch to work? Maybe we'll find an effect. And so I think that's a huge potential moderator we need to test. Second, that I mentioned right at the start, where I told you the original research idea, here we focus on the point of job entry. What happens then if you are already in this job for some years, and people are considering whether to promote you, and you come to work every day with this nice Louis Vuitton bag, and your boss comes to work with a bag from Gap, or lower status bag? How would then people perceive you? I don't think we have any research that actually examines this phenomenon. With that, thank you.